Your ears do not deceive you. You have just entered the Cryptid Creator Corner brought to you by your friends at Comic Book Yeti. So without further ado, let's get on to the interview.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of the Cryptid Creator Corner. I'm Byron O'Neill, your host for our Comics Creator Chat. I'm joined by a returning guest to the show, Tate Brombal. Tate was on last June promoting his Dark Horse Comics project, The Oddly Pedestrian Life of Christopher Chaos, which is now happily on its 12th issue, a rarity in comics these days. I love that series. More on that later because we have a lot to cover, focusing on his new project, Green Lantern Dark from DC Comics. Tate, welcome back to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me back. I love this show, so I am a happy returnee. It's great.
Thank you so much. I knew you were doing big things, and thanks so much for letting Jimmy and I be a little small part of your journey. So, and you've got not just one but two DC Comics projects dropping soon. Congratulations! I feel like I need that like Super Mario level, like level up thing going on. How are you feeling? There's a lot of buzz about the projects right now.
Yeah, it's very cool. It's a bit surreal. It all lined up very interestingly. I'm sure we'll get into it more, but I've been developing Green Lantern Dark for like 2.5 years, pushing 3 years.
Wow. Okay.
Batgirl has been like in development like barely a year. So it's just, but now they're both coming out like 2 weeks apart, which is just how comics functions. but
Yeah,
it's
sometimes,
very
yeah.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah, it's really
I'm
weird.
glad they kind of play off of. Hopefully, we'll play off the hype of each other. Like I'm glad Green Lantern Dark is my first DC book because it was when it was first developing, and it means a lot to me. So I'm hoping like people read that, and then like 2 weeks later, I'll show up again in the comic shops, and they'll grab Batgirl too.
That would be great. Like some of those variant covers for Batgirl are stellar, just like outstanding.
And there are more that have not been released that I am just like dying for the world to see. It's like I don't know how they grabbed some of the best artists and their takes on cast are just incredible. Like it's really cool.
Nice. Well, jumping into Green Lantern Dark, we know this is an Elseworlds story, which I find amazing. It's such fertile ground to explore characters in a kind of a more untethered way, which I am always beating that drum. I love seeing established characters through a new lens where you don't have so many constraints. Some of my favorite DC projects have that tag attached, like the Batman
Mm-hmm.
Red Rain stuff or Superman Red Sun. This is a part of that initiative to return to the concept again for these popular out of continuity storylines. So as far as Green Lantern iterations, we've had a few down the years: Evil's Might, 1001 Emerald Knights, and I'm including the Darkest Night, which was Batman. I was listening to your interview on Comics Online at SDCC, and that was on YouTube, and about how your uncle gave you a copy of Kingdom Come back in the day, and that being hugely influential for you. So what's the backstory there?
Yeah. So I didn't know anyone really that read comics growing up. It was
Okay.
very much like me in a bubble. My parents were not comic book people. They were not superhero people. I found my own way into it, mainly through just like the movies coming out at the time.
Yeah.
Like the original Spider-Man, the X-Men movies I was obsessed with. I even loved like the Ben Affleck Daredevil. So it's just like I was just the perfect age for them. Like I loved every single one. So I got into comics just Googling like Marvel comics to follow up on the movies because I was like, there's more stories that exist for these characters.
Yeah.
So I found my own way into comics, started going to a comic shop weekly. And then when my uncle realized that I was reading comics, he was a big comics like Vertigo guy, like in the 80s and 90s. So he saw me reading comics, and I was like amazed that someone else in my family read them because no one else had shown any interest. They're like, oh, that's a nice thing Tate likes to read. So I remember discovering that. And at the time I was reading Magneto Testament monthly, another like very just like at that time, at that age, reading it like was just like, this is what comics can be, this is what superhero comics can be. So I was pulling Magneto Testament and I handed him that series and was like, this is like a book I'm loving right now, like check this out. And he read it, loved it, returned it. And then the next time I visited him, I was on the couch and he walked by and just plopped down like every single issue of Kingdom Come on the couch. And I was like,
Okay.
what is this?
Yeah.
And I was mainly into Marvel at that time because I was just chasing the movies. And then, so that Kingdom Come was the first DC comic book I read.
Okay.
And the only other like versions of the characters I knew were from the Justice League cartoon that I grew up with, and Teen Titans, which I grew up with, and then like the Batman, like Tim Burton's Batman movies. Bryan Singer's Superman had come out, so like those were the versions of the character I knew, and I knew like obviously a lot about Superman and Batman just from like cultural zeitgeist of those characters.
Sure.
But Kingdom Come was like the first time I sat down with DC characters in a comic book form, and those were like the first versions of those characters I read. And I was
Okay.
like, I don't even know if I knew it was an Elseworlds comic. I was just like, what is happening? Like, this story is wild, and like they're like just the impact of it. I don't know. It was really incredible, and obviously Alex Ross's like artwork, because like I didn't know comics could look like this. So then I like
Yeah.
chased down Marvels and read Marvels as well because I just loved what he was doing. So yeah, no, Kingdom Come was the first, like an Elseworlds comic was the first DC comic I read. So it's like very cool to now my first DC project is an Elseworlds comic.
That's awesome. And I'm wondering how much different, if you hadn't hit that sweet spot with those movies, your comics journey might have been if Steel with Shaquille O'Neal had been had been your
Right?
in with comics movies.
Yeah.
Well, was
Totally.
there something specifically appealing about you wanting to tell a Green Lantern story in the Elseworlds?
Well, actually, the project was brought to me.
Okay.
So I didn't pitch this story. Ben Abernathy, who was the original editor on this series, he had kind of collected a bunch of ideas that had kind of been developed at DC for a previous like line-wide reboot or iteration of what they could have done with new characters that never happened or came to fruition. So one of the properties was the idea of a Green Lantern who was magic based, and there were even like character designs kind of done up. And there was even like a rough outline and a character description. And so the project landed in my emails. I quickly like digested it all, and I saw the potential. Like I was like, Green Lantern fantasy book is everything I would want to do if I was going to do Green Lantern. But like this, I kind of I took it all and then was like, I like the base idea of this, and then just rewrote my own version. I was like, I would take this idea and came up with a totally new character name, totally new story. Everything was new, except just the idea of like a Green Lantern a fantasy Green Lantern book.
Okay.
So I returned to Ben with like a totally new breakdown of what my version of this would be, and Ben was kind of like, I guess, taken aback and like surprised that like I kind of, I don't know. I think he was just surprised by what I came up with and was like, "Holy crap! Like I really like this." And originally, it was supposed to be a one-shot comic. It was just going to
Okay.
be like a one-shot within a mini series of other ideas that had never been used.
Mhm.
But he read my breakdown and my pitch for that one-shot and was like, "Yeah, no, we're gonna do this as its own like maxi or the mini series." So we got taken out of that book. I don't think that mini series happened, and then he was like, I want to do Elseworlds, and this will be like one of the launch books. So
Okay.
then Elseworlds, he started building Elseworlds, and then this book got pushed to a 7-issue miniseries. So it's kind of like the long-winded version of it. But yeah, I kind of took that initial spark of like Green Lantern but fantasy, and was like, hey, but how would I tell this story? And then this is what came out of me basically.
Okay. Well, there are 8 members of the Green Lantern Corps on Earth, so with an Elseworlds project, you don't have to worry about continuity. So why introduce a new one? Like, why did we go that route?
I think partly because the option was there, and the character I wanted to write was unlike any other Green Lantern that I had read.
Okay.
So then I couldn't like be like, oh, this is John Stewart, but then it doesn't feel like a John Stewart. Like if the character doesn't talk like John Stewart, this might not be a John Stewart story. So it was
Sure.
like, if the option is to like, this is a brand new universe of story, I'd rather just kind of have a clean slate where people can't really bring preconceptions of a character. I can be like, no, this is this, and it just feels like more like this is me doing Green Lantern. This is my version of one, and allowing me to kind of create a character from scratch, like really kind of freed me up to just really leave my mark on this, on like the icon that is Green Lantern.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, and there was the idea like Tangent Green Lantern was always involved with the property, with the initial idea. So I knew it had to be somewhat related to the Tangent universe, like that character. So it kind of just came out of that.
Okay. Well, we know a few of the new Lantern's characteristics already. This is Rina Mori. So she's a reluctant hero. You've talked about how much willpower will play a substantial role with her development. You know, as a disabled person, I was immediately attracted to this project because of her struggle. You know, I feel that constant pull of atrophy as somebody with lupus whose body's always doing weird shit. And big picture society, there's a sense of hopelessness that I'm seeing in a lot of younger people. So why make that kind of the nucleus of her as a character, that fight for hope via this willpower vehicle to overcome?
Yeah, well, a couple things. Talking about willpower, like I just find like that's the nucleus of the Green Lantern character. Like they operate on willpower,
Yeah,
um, and their greatest weakness is the fear, is fear and like hopelessness. So the second part is I was really wanting to make her a contemporary character, like take the Green Lantern and be like, what is a version of this character and their story in time, like today times,
yeah,
that feels relevant and pertinent and like kind of matters in a way. And so I was I was initially coming up with all this stuff in 2021. So it was like short after 2020 and the world was still feeling all the ways. So
yeah.
I poured all of that anxiety, and struggle and hopelessness into the book. And even beyond that, like just the looming environmental threat that is always hovering over us. Is just like, do we
Sure.
have hope? Like when it's this bleak or like seems this bleak, how do we find that willpower to persevere or continue to fight the fight to like make sure there's still a planet? Um, so and the Green Lantern is literally the perfect superhero to have that conversation because Rina Mori is a character who functions on willpower but barely has the willpower to get out of bed in the morning. So that is going to be her struggle, and she's going to learn like where do we find willpower, and if we can't find it within ourselves, like where do we find it, where do we get it? And yeah, it's like I feel like this is a really special circumstance of I feel like very grateful to be telling the story with like such an iconic brand as the Green Lantern, like that character, and
Yeah.
have it feel so relevant. And like I don't know, I want this to be an effective story and get people like hopefully just be super relatable, and people, even though she's sometimes a terrible hero, it's just more like if we were in that position with the weight of the world on our shoulders, it's like just what that struggle feels like, is really just kind of like the compass of the series.
It makes her a very relatable hero too. Yeah. So what else is in her DNA? Did you have anything else in mind when you're kind of putting her together?
Um, she's kind of pulls from that classic, just like fantasy loner, like a Strider type who's like kind of made up their mind and like hunched over in the corner of the bar, doesn't want to be bothered. So she kind of pulls from that. So she's very dry and very just wants to be, she's kept her light low, and she's kind of from everything she's been through is just like don't let people close. So it pulls on that type of archetype. This book is also a lot about just like trauma and the effects of trauma in like times like these. So she has a lot of that, and a big part of the book is just working through what that is, and how you find your way through it. So yeah, she's a difficult character. She has struggled a lot, and she sometimes is not the nicest person. But hopefully readers will understand like why she is that way.
Well, typically we come to associate Green Lantern stories with being more cosmic, more sci-fi. You talked about this being fantasy and magic, and it's actually set in New England. Which immediately connotes that horror vibe. You have to think of Lovecraft there. Solomon Grundy and his undead army are kind of the primary antagonists. And that's Solomon returned to his roots as an enemy of the Golden Age Alan Scott. The original Green Lantern. So in terms of the topography of the setting, what appealed to you about that place specifically?
Well, at some point I was like, where do I set this story? Because it's a post-apocalyptic Earth. Like the Earth has fallen, evil has won, or like the darkness has won. And it was going to be like in America. So I was like, where in America do I set this fantasy horror comic? And I was like, no, New England's just the no-brainer. So
Exactly. Yep.
I went a step further, and when the like cataclysmic event of the Earth kind of falling happened, New England actually like broke off of continental US and like is now just an island in the middle of the Atlantic. So it's like really an isolated New England environment where monsters are just like festering and they're everywhere. So it's Green Lantern versus all types of monsters. Some of them Lovecraftian, some of them more classic. The first issue is very like Grundy is the antagonist. He is not the primary antagonist of the series, who will be
Okay.
introduced in issue 2.
Okay.
But Grundy, part of it was, yeah, I'm gonna do a new Green Lantern. I want her first villain to be like Alan Scott's first villain. So I was like, Grundy. But then it made even more sense because just the lineage of this character comes from Tangent Green Lantern, and her whole thing is that she could raise the dead for them to live out one more wish, or to like resolve their problems on Earth. So that just worked perfectly into tying into Grundy, who is kind of like this zombie character. And in our book, he can also raise the dead. So it's Grundy and his like zombie horde. So it all just fits perfectly for what this was, and we wanted to be like a very clear like horror comic from the first issue. So
Yeah.
Grundy was a perfect fit. I loved writing him. I loved what we did with him and his zombies. Werther had a lot of fun designing him. And yeah, no, it just worked perfectly. And I'm really excited for the reveal of the villain in issue 2, who is also a brand new character,
Okay.
but comes from a lineage of characters as well. And she is a lot of fun to write. So yeah, it'll be exciting.
Stay tuned then.
Yeah.
Well, as I understand it, there's no ring, or it doesn't start with a ring anyway, and that feels a lot like D&D, playing with a magic lantern to make all the darkness disappear, which is also an Alan Scott nod as well, because he started with the lantern, fashioned a ring from it. As someone with a background in anthropology, material culture and comics just fascinates me. Sometimes I get lost a little too much maybe in it. So why did you want to downplay the classic role of the ring in the story and kind of pivot to a lantern?
Well, I didn't think it was necessary for this story or this
Okay.
character. And the symbolism of a flame and a lantern against the literal darkness was just too strong that I didn't think a ring would add to it. Rings also are very associated with like oaths, which makes sense for like the Green Lantern oath. And there's no version of that in our story that at
Okay.
least Rina Mori knows, because she doesn't know much about what she is. But there's no larger brotherhood or core to like need to have this kind of the symbol of that ring.
Okay.
So and yeah, just like the visual of like her with with her literal Green Lantern and the green flame that against the Dark Knight is just like too strong. I was like, let's just keep it as iconic, as simple as possible. We haven't, and it's just, and again, like the Tangent Green Lantern only had her cane and her lantern, so it's carrying
Right.
over from that. We kind of take the concept of that Tangent Green Lantern and push it further and develop it much more. But we just wanted it to be that simple, iconic image of the Green Lantern and her literal green flame.
Yeah, it has a lot of metaphorical weight. Lanterns can be seen as an allegory for the divine, lighting the way for others to see. And in the tarot deck, it has a particular meaning. It's 6-pointed star, the seal of Solomon, which is a symbol of wisdom and solitude, learning things that you can only learn as an individual. So I'm gathering here from what you're saying, we're going to get into both of those things. She's a symbol of hope for others, but personal growth is also something that's going to happen. So it seems like the Lantern is sort of a character in and to itself. So how did you want to merge those? Because it feels like it's almost a curse even for her from what you're describing.
Yeah, the lantern definitely has a lot of that symbolism behind it, especially that idea of yeah, even that like tarot reading of what it represents. It's just like she also needs to be like tarot, and that type of stuff only matters if you're willing to read into it, if you're willing to accept that. So like
Yeah.
her whole thing is, even if she'll accept the lantern, if she'll accept these powers properly, and there's no path to healing or becoming this heroic version or a better version of yourself until you're willing to accept it. So that is a big part of her journey. And along the way, she'll find things, or she'll think she's getting better, she'll think she's improving, to quickly realize that this is just another projection or another mask or another something she's kind of hiding behind. And it won't be until everything is kind of stripped away and she finally like reckons with who she is and what she is. So like, yeah, that is all plays into her character a lot. Which is like my favorite thing to do. I just love that, getting into characters' heads and pushing them through that stuff, and then like this, just the iconic symbolism that plays into all of it, especially just graphically, because like comics is the best place to do that. So yeah, no, that's totally all a part of her journey. I forget the second part of your question. If I don't know if I answered it.
No, you definitely did. I mean, just that the lantern itself feels like a burden, and I
Right.
guess
Oh yeah,
that
yeah, totally.
yeah, that's been clear across different Green Lantern characters. So that's nothing new, but it sounds like from what you're describing too that community is going to play a fairly significant role in just helping her find herself.
Yeah, she's gonna, against her will, there will be a little family growing around her that will pull her out of her own shadows, and towards the light. Um, she definitely sees it as a curse. We'll see why when like her origins kind of are revealed. Um, she didn't exactly want this power or responsibility. And so then it just becomes a question of, but you do have the power, and with that, the responsibility. So like, what do you do? So that is that informs a lot of the story.
Well, one of the things that I love about Elseworlds projects are that they tend to create their own really unique, distinct visual sandboxes. I'm
Hmm.
thinking back to others. The Chaykin and Brereton Thrill Killer is one of my favorite Batman stories because there's nothing else visually like it in the Batman
Hmm.
catalog of stories. But you and Werther, I'm assuming, have at least some sort of tangential working relationship established with the Something is Killing the Children and House of Slaughter franchises. So what can we expect that will make this visually distinct from you two as a creator combo?
Yeah, no, me and Werther have become like the best of friends. So because we met because of House of Slaughter, and then um, just through some like convention circuits, we were always at similar ones. And then I was in Italy a couple years ago, last summer, and I met him for dinner, and then that dinner is actually how he became the artist on this book, because I was telling him about it, and I was like, our artist just dropped out, like I don't know what to do, like I'm so worried about this book and like finding the right feel, and like I wasn't even pitching it to him, but he like stopped me mid conversation, was like, I want you to ask me to draw this book, and I was
Oh
like,
wow.
what? Because he just resonated with like the story I told him. And I didn't think it was even possible because he's still drawing Something's Killing the Children full time. He's just now drawing a second series on top of that, which is crazy. But yeah, no, we get along extremely well. Last New York Comic Con, we shared a hotel room together. We had dinner every night together, so we've become friends. And
cool.
yeah, so, and I think you can feel that in this book. I don't know, it feels really special with the pages. It looks like nothing else in superhero comics right now. It's really totally unique, and that's all Werther, and it's all Giovanna, the colorist. We're getting all of Giovanna's colors in right now of issue 3, and they're just like out of this world. Like, I have not seen anything that looks like this in Cape Comics in like so long. Werther's really bringing like what he does in Something's Killing Children. He loves manga and horror manga, especially horror manga from the 80s. So I know like that's a huge influence for him. But yeah, like the way like the blacks and the whites, like the dark and the light in this book work is just incredible and so intrinsic to like the story itself. They're just bringing everything they need and like can to this book, and it feels special. So I'm like really proud of like them and what we're making here.
Yeah, the sample pages that are out online that I checked out blew me away. It is simultaneously exactly what you'd expect from him and not what you'd expect, as you alluded to, in a Capes comic book. And it really jumps out at you. You know, he hasn't done much superhero work in the past on major characters. I think there was some Spider-Man stuff back in 2014, but it does lean so heavily into that dark visual space, just like Something is Killing the Children, with these very heavy shadows, you know, and the darkness really beating back the light, as if the darkness itself is also an entity. So
Totally.
you know, there's that really familiar silhouette to me that was struck between Rina and the Spectre, who has another Green Lantern reference kind of point in there with Hal Jordan. And so the two of you working together on this feels like serendipitous in a way. Is that how it felt to you? I mean, what was in the wine over dinner? Because that
I know,
was a
right?
special bottle of wine. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this entire project feels very serendipitous. Like everything kind of lined up. And in like a few years, like I don't know if this book could have existed. So like it was just like this moment where everything came together, and it's now like it's just incredible to see it coming out and how good it looks and how special it like really feels. So I think it's a rare comic, and I said this about like Barbalien Red Planet, my first comic I ever worked on, where I was like, if this is the only comic I ever write, like I would be so happy because I was so proud of it. But like I'm now feeling the same way about this project, where I'm like, if I go out with this book, like I will be happy because like it just feels that special. So it's really cool to be a part of.
Wow, that's an amazing feeling, because after reading the Barbalien book, that was when I knew I've got to get Tate on the podcast, because this book is it's one of my favorites. It's just absolutely
I'm really proud of it.
Incredible story. So if people haven't read that, please go back and pick that up. It's an amazing book. And I can't wait to see how all of this develops, because from what I've seen, nothing else will be like it on shelves. And your enthusiasm for it absolutely is selling me even more. So I'm pretty hype about that.
Cool.
I wanted to touch on the other DC project you have announced. So that's Batgirl. You know, I saw several Cassandra Twitter X posts from Paris Elaine. Hopefully, I'm getting Paris's last name correct there. But interpretations of her, which are so good. I've used them for actually coloring practice for myself.
Cool.
I know that Takashi, is it Miyazawa? Is that? Okay, cool. I got that right. Is working with you on the book as the artist. So are pages rolling in for that? Have you actually seen things yet?
Yeah, it's the first issue is actually off to printers.
Okay.
Takeshi is almost on all the pencils on issue 2. So he is like, I don't know, he's just a pro. He's been in the industry for like he's just a pro at what he does. So, and I know I've said this about Werther and other people, but like what Takeshi's bringing to this book also feels like totally like he's still leveling up, even though he's been in comics for 20 plus years. I like haven't seen his work look like this. I think he's just embracing the fact that it's a martial arts action comic and like
Yeah.
really leaning into that. And it's like like there's the energy to it is so good. The fight choreography, I'm like, how did you? There's so much going on in this in this panel in this spread, but everything connects in like this beautifully choreographed fight scene. So it looks really good, and I love because the book the story really centers on Cassandra and Lady Shiva and their relationship, and his just character acting between like mother and daughter and their back and forth it's like really incredible. And so much acting, even though like Cassandra, the full first issue, she's fully in her mask, so all the acting is like in little things, you can't see her face, but you still know how she feels. And it's, I don't know, he's doing such amazing work on it.
So do you have any background in martial arts? Did you have to go back with scripting and learn in a way how to script a fight
I
scene like that?
Well, like the only martial arts I did was like karate all through like my younger years.
Okay.
But I basically went and watched a bunch of martial arts movies. I like rewatched a bunch. Um, yeah, and a lot of them really did influence like how I approached the fight scenes, especially like in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. The choreography of every fight scene is so much more than just like cool punches and kicks. Like it's rooted in the characters, and
Yep.
like with no dialogue, you know what their fight is, what their struggle is, and it's this push and pull, and it's amazing. So I really I pulled a lot from that, especially the Shiva and Cass dynamic. These two characters who are better with their fists than their words, so they just battle it out through the way they know. Um, so that's been a big influence, and Takeshi just takes it and makes it so much better than I can imagine. It's a really amazing.
Do you have an origin point yourself with Cassandra as a character?
So with Cass, I fell in love with the character as an adult because
Okay.
I really was like a Marvel head as a kid, and it
Yeah.
wasn't until I was finally found like the treasure trove. Like I'd obviously read a lot of the classic DC books, um, but Cass wasn't really in those kind of seminal collections or those big books. But when I finally like dove really into DC and was like finding this treasure trove of comics, I some of the first characters I like really fell in love with were Lady Shiva in The Question, like her first appearance post Crisis, and why I'm just
Okay.
like, she's only in this book for like a handful of pages, and she just has this presence to her that I adore. And then with Cass, it was like her 2000s like solo title on Batgirl, where I just like read through the whole thing. It was like, this character is so fun and so unique and so like perfect for the Batman world. And then the series kind of came from a conversation again with Ben Abernathy when he was still at DC. We loved working together in Green Lantern Dark, and San Diego 2023, we were just having a meeting, having drinks and talking about, and I was like, I want to get into the Bat books because he was the head editor on Batman. So I was like, let's talk about like Bat characters. Like, who do you want to see? Like, let's talk about characters. And he said, you know what? I've wanted like Cassandra Cain's an interesting character. Like, we need another Batgirl. And I was like, Cassandra, like out of all the characters in the Bat family, like that's my character. Like, I love her. So we both wanted to make a Cass Cain book, and we kind of discovered that in that moment. So then it just became about finding out what the story would be. And I always felt like the dynamic with Lady Shiva had been explored, but I still felt like a lot of it hadn't been resolved fully, or in some ways it kind of feels like it has, but every time her mom, or heaven forbid her dad, comes back into her life, she kind of falls apart and becomes this little girl again. So like I felt like that's very relatable, especially just like people, no matter how old you get, like your relationship with your parents, like you kind of revert to this younger self. Or if there's any struggle in the relationship, like that kind of gets compounded even more. So I wanted to just write a story that finally takes these two characters and it's just them against the world and battling through their own issues while also having their backs against a wall, needing to fight off whoever's trying to kill them. And they need to work together, and half the time they're fighting each other. So it's just that dynamic. I really wanted to do a story that just finally kind of addresses a lot of how messy those kind of relationships can get, just parental and child relationships. So it's a lot of that, and I'm having a blast. It's really fun.
I can assure you, as you get a little older, those relationships will also flip, where you will find yourself being the parent of your parent, and going through that myself right now. It's pretty unique. It's a shift for sure. Well, what I'm hearing is, for anybody out there listening who wants to break into writing at DC, getting the perfect artist, is you better have the right alcohol, right?
Yeah, it's all about the drinks.
and this is a 25th anniversary feature for her. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, because she debuted in 1999. I don't know. I forget the month right now, but yeah, basically, which is really cool. And it's been like 18 years since her last series ended. So she's been due a Batgirl series of her own, which was another, like, I knew people would be excited, and the response was like incredible. They got Batgirl trending, and then was just that. Like, I don't know. It was like, I was floored. Like, I knew it would be exciting and received like with a lot of anticipation, but just like I was completely floored. And I don't know. It's very cool, and I feel very like honored and privileged to be like contributing to this character who like so many people love and just relate to.
Well, we talk about social media being absolute garbage, and it is. Like, to be clear, it is. But at least in this case, it sounds like that love that you were able to receive from people who were excited about it took some of the anxiety off of writing.
Yeah, well, it just affirmed a lot of my own feelings. Like, yes, this character deserves the spotlight, and like affirmed all the reasons I love her and why other people love her. So yeah, I'm really excited for people to pick it up and see like where we're taking her.
And that drops early November, mid-November?
Yeah, I want to say the 9th. I think it's like the second Wednesday in November, whatever that is.
Okay.
November 6th.
Cool.
It'll be. Yeah.
All right. So everybody needs to get pre-orders in. That's the pitch.
For both books. Green Lantern Dark and Batgirl.
Well, and Christopher Chaos. People need to pick this up too. I've been pulling it monthly. We're now on issue 12. I haven't picked 12 up yet. I'm on 11. I just haven't got over there yet. The twins are absolutely fantastic characters. I've always had a thing for werewolves, and now, as somebody with lupus, a disease that carries that Latin wolf genus namesake, I can really personally empathize with characters who struggle to control their body's response to a virus or whatever the catalyst in this particular case might be. And I didn't get to ask this last time, but where did the idea of Vivica's spirit cats come from? Because that's a really cool twist. I didn't see that one coming.
Let me think. Okay, so at one point, so we really wanted someone in the cast who was human. And because she is not a monster herself, we wanted there to be like a human ally or representative in this monster friendship, monster club. And then the idea of the cats came super late. Like, I think I was writing her spotlight. The character was already designed, and I'd already written up like her whole character sheet bio, all my ideas about her. And then I was writing issue 3, which is her spotlight issue, where she kind of narrates and we get to see a peek into her life. And I was like, something is missing. And then for some reason, I was like, ghost cats. She's missing ghost cats. And then,
of course. Why not ghost cats? Yeah.
So then I honestly, I don't know where the idea, I love cats. And I was like, I wish I knew where the idea came from, but for some reason in my brain, ghost cats came before. I think we were trying to play on different types of monsters, and we hadn't touched ghosts. So I was like, how do we get ghosts into this book? And then I was like, what if she has ghost cats there? And then I came up with like the choker with like the gem in it that they're tethered to. Eventually it'll be revealed more about the history of that when we get to more Viv time. But yeah, so I really wanted, and I loved the visual of her having these ghost cats. I don't know, I hadn't seen it before, and I knew people would love that. I love it, so it just worked out.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really cool twist, and I really enjoyed is the seventh and the eighth issues where you get a little bit more of Adam's history. I did not see that one coming, so that was really cool. Different artist and everything.
That was some of my favorite stuff. Some of my favorite stuff I've written in the book, because I love like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein so much. So, and like even as I read it a few times, but even as that first, there's just pieces of it that just moved me so much. Especially, I think what kind of issue 7, where it's mostly Victor's story, where he gets this obsessive drive. And then I got to like queer it a bit, which was like I always like read into the novel as like Victor, he's like leaving Elizabeth constantly. He's like leaving her letters unanswered. But then Henry, his best friend from childhood, shows up at his door and he like abandons everything for Henry. So I'm like, and just like his relationship with Henry in the novel was always just interesting, because like when Victor kind of collapses and is sick, like Henry is the one that comes and takes care of him. So I just really leaned into that, and I was like, I get to rewrite this iconic story for our universe. Like I'm just gonna like queer it as much as I can and kind of feed that into the nucleus of those characters, and then how that feeds into Adam as a character as well. Yeah, so I had so much fun writing those. I'm really proud of those issues, and there will be more. That is only the first 2 parts of Adam's story. We'll eventually get to the rest.
Nice. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It feels, honestly, when you look at the historical route, I think they were at Lake Geneva, where the germ of that idea came from, and everything that was going on with Mary and Byron and like the Polidori Association too. I mean, it feels very historically accurate to take it in that direction. So
yeah, I read an entire Mary Shelley biography because I was just so into it, which then informs, spoiler, we'll be introducing the bride, and I got heavily into Mary Shelley and read about her entire life as research for that. So I'm very excited for that to come out.
what? So I haven't actually read a biography of her. Was there anything interesting about her as a character that is not more part of the established, short version of the story, like the log line, if you will?
Well, like I think the wildest part for me is that she only really became a celebrated person in literary history and history period until like I don't like recently. Like it was either the 60s or the 80s, like one of the major like feminist movements where they actually like looked back at just historical literary history and kind of took Mary Shelley and her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, and started celebrating them. So that just how recent it is where we actually realize like how intelligent and incredible this woman was. Because up until that point, she was just written off as Percy's wife. So it was just like, so I think that's a big part where she was written off as just like a wife, even though she was the one that collected and edited and re-released all of Percy's poetry. And like kind of was the one who took, like she at one point had to abandon her writing career just in order to take care of his estate. So she kind of stepped back as who she was in order, because like Percy's death like radically changed her. Like a lot of deaths, most of her children died. Percy died. So she was just this woman who was constantly beleaguered by so many tragedies. So then when Percy died, like she literally guarded his heart. Byron wanted his heart, and she was like, you can't, like his literal heart. And Percy was like, you can't. And like she took his heart to make sure no one else would get it and that Byron wouldn't get it. So she, I don't know, she kind of stepped back from what she was capable of, who she could be, to be this wife and like take care of her husband's estate. And I don't see that in a way as like she wanted to do that. Like obviously she wanted to be this writer and continue what she wanted to do, but she loved Percy so much and like wanted to make sure his estate was taken care of. So I don't, she like, and she got so much of that from her mother, who she never knew, because in Mary Wollstonecraft. So the biography was a dual biography of both Marys.
Okay.
And every chapter would go back and forth. But it was amazing. I learned so much about both of them and how much Mary Wollstonecraft like impacted Mary and just like growing up in the shadow of this incredible woman. I don't know. Sorry, I went on a tangent, but I love it so much.
No, I wanted you to. Who's the writer of that?
Let me pull it up. It's a really excellent book. It like really. Let me find what it is. But yeah, no, I became obsessed with Mary Shelley. Still obsessed, but I really loved. So it's called Romantic Outlaws by Charlotte Gordon.
Okay, I'll write it down.
Yeah, it's really good.
Well, I have more than a passing curiosity with all that stuff. My mother, very conservative Southern woman, was an English teacher, and she had no idea. She just wanted a literary name for me, so I got Byron. And then I was like, "Did you do any research at all about who he was? Because I kind of think you probably would not have named me that if you did." So,
well, it's cool because a lot of biographies are pretty hard on Byron. I think fairly.
Yeah.
This one is like really influenced by both Mary's actual diaries and actual words, and a lot of ancillary diaries, like filling in gaps and pieces. And it gives a better, well-rounded picture of Byron and who he was, because he was a really good friend. No one, like to Mary, especially Mary Shelley, when like the rest of the world turned their back on her specifically, just because she was a woman at a time being very radical.
Yeah.
And Byron was at points the only man who like stood by her. So like he had like a lot of great like aspects, especially for that time. But yeah, he was also Byron was gonna Byron as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. He was a bit of a bastard. So
yeah.
Well, in terms of Christopher Chaos, we have the trade available. People can pick that up if they want to go back. I'm a trades guy, so that fact that I'm getting it monthly should tell you a lot about how I feel about it. So make sure to pick it up. Make sure to get your pre-orders in for Green Lantern Dark and Batgirl, because Tate's having a lot of fun clearly with these, and it sounds like he's got some really cool stuff planned. Anything else dropping soon that you'd like to tease? And I will say, Steve Fox always leaves me guessing with a color or a word reference. So if you're willing to just drop one of those. I know I'm putting you on the spot.
So what's coming out is another thing that's coming out is the Christopher Chaos Halloween special, which we can pre-order as well. That comes out October 26th or 30th. I don't know, just in time for Halloween. And that is where our universe's bride will debut. And why I did all of this Mary Shelley research is why you will see why, or like this character come to life in that Halloween special. What color? I'll say there's something in development. The color is yellow.
Okay, cool. Yellow it is. Well, Tate, thanks for coming back on and visiting with us. I appreciate it. It's always great to have you on.
Yeah, no, thank you. I was so happy to come back. It's great to see you.
Yeah. Oh, and where can people find you online? I'll put it in the show notes.
Just at Tate Brombal, my name on Twitter /X and Instagram.
Okay, I'll put them in the links. This is Byron O'Neill on behalf of all of us at Comic Book Yeti. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.